important debates, by the way the debates still go on, was the idea of purity, sexuality, the idea of the body, an idea of what is the dance actually doing. Is it a sensual, sexual? So the idea of vulgar, what is vulgar? Vis-a-vis everything being bhakti, or a surrender to a supreme. Bhakti as being a religious / spiritual idea, not divorced from that, whereas vulgarity. So the vulgarity question comes because of the people who own this art form, the Devadasis. So the whole idea is they were dancing for the Lord, they were dancing for, in courts, they were dancing in very, very sexual context. In fact, their way of dancing could be seen as being sexual, being as almost welcoming sexuality. So the whole idea is, what is Bharatanatyam all about? So Bharatanatyam had to also philosophically find a complete rejig. So the whole idea was, for example, the padams. Right? We've spoken about the padams. The padams are extremely erotic, straightforward erotic. Javalis also are. And I told you Javalis were in the salons of urban Madras. So then the idea of Madhura Bhakti comes in, a concept that is there before, but then all sexuality is then made to be subservient to the idea of bhakti itself. So sexual overture or the idea of being sexually attracted is not seen in this form as being between the woman and the man. And let me state, of course, a lot of texts are extremely patriarchal, extremely misogynist. For modern feminists, it's very, very problematic. But let's not get there. Let's just accept that was before any of the women in this room come at me, that's just the text. Okay, I'm just stating it. But that's just a context. But the women were already calling out for the man, saying that I'm pining for you, you are with another woman all this while, you thought my body was the best, now I'm getting old, you think my body is old, the younger woman is attracting you more. But that man then becomes Krishna, then the whole thing turns into a twist. Then Krishna is allowed to do that, right? Sorry, the Krishna was an accidental name, doesn't refer to me. Just in case you guys, I just thought for a second, I said, whoops, that's a problem. So, but so how does one position these ideas, right? I mean, what interpretation you're going to take is your own, but I'm saying it is a way of reworking this whole model. Any of the pieces in Bharatanatyam, one of the problems I think Bharatanatyam or the modern thing had is that their pieces which they got from the Tanjore quartet were all erotic and sexual and sensual. What do you do with this thing? So you have to give it see, the convenience with Carnatic music's rediscovery was we had enough text which was purely religious and devotional for me to say Padams, Javalis can be moved aside. I don't need to worry about them. I have enough Tyagaraja, Rama, 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 Kamakshi, Krishna going around here. So I had enough to fall back on to rediscover this. Bharatanatyam does not have it. Their textual musical references were all about the body and about love and about infatuation and about everything that goes with it, right? So then what do you have to do? You have to remodel the idea. So the remodeling is not only a psychological, philosophical thing, it changes form. So what is accepted, what is considered nuance, for example? If I was going as a dancer, tell the Lord to come and have sex with me tonight, what would be considered vulgar? What would be considered nuanced? Now those are the interesting things that started happening. So when somebody says this is vulgar, what they are actually saying is, don't openly say that you want to have sex with that man. You can indicate that that's the possibility of tonight. So these kind of nuances start coming into the discourse. These are upper caste, upper class ideas. Let's be very clear. These are ideas of upper caste movements, upper Brahminical movements, which we even carry today. As an upper caste person, I can tell you these ideas are still there in my baggage of what I would consider vulgar. I'll give you a classic example, very, very contemporary. I don't know how many of you heard of this whole controversy with this singer called Kovan. About a year ago, this Ghana singer called Kovan, it's on YouTube, you can go watch this too, put out a song which instinctively I'm telling you is very offensive, okay? Which goes after our present Chief Minister, J. Jayalalitha. It says all kinds of things. His name is Kovan. Kovan, K-O, Kovan. He was arrested the next day for sedition or sedition charges or some ridiculous thing like that, okay? Now, if I step back from my baggage and again go back to what the man did, there's another way of looking at it. The form of Ghana, the aesthetic form, is very overt. It's very challenging. It's meant to just say it on your face as it is. It is meant to really shake you up directly. So in Tamil they'll say pacha pacha solnon solva. You know, just say it like, you know, instead of saying, you know, to put an analogy of sexuality since we're talking about it, instead of saying, can I come to your house tonight to spend a few hours? I could just say, I won't have sex with you tonight. They're two different things, right? But that's what you're saying when you're saying both. In Ghana, they will just say the latter. They won't do all these ideas. Now, we associate these kind of nuances to sophistication, right? To a certain kind of culture, of a certain civilizational idea. Kovan was basically using the form of Ghana to present it in Ghana. Aesthetically, what he did was perfectly correct as far as I'm concerned, as an aesthetic observation. But what happens when I view it is my baggage comes and tells me, whoops, that's gross. But is it gross? If I was a Ghana singer, that's exactly, if I was going to be honest to the Ghana form, that's how I should have done it. So I'm just presenting this an analogy to the idea of vulgarity, idea of what is nuance. So, you know, so Shringara must be there, but without idea of vulgarity. So I think there were changes in movements. Changes, for example, the Kalakshetra Bharatanatyam style itself plays down the idea of emotional quantity in terms of abhinaya, in terms of how much you communicate abhinaya to a large extent compared to many other styles. One of the forms, one of the theories behind that is the whole idea of what is the suggestive. What is suggestive, what is overt. So all this becomes part of this rediscovery of Bharatanatyam, in which Rukmini Devi plays a very important role, along with E. Krishna Iyer, and the Brahmin community starts learning this art form. Now, like I said, who do they learn from? They have to learn from the Nattuvanars. Now, as the anti-Nach movement took off and the Devadasis, the women were being sidelined, the men then completely come into the forefront. The Nattuvanars are the same community, but they are the ones who have been conducting the dance performances for the Devadasis. They are the ones who have been singing for the dance performances also. So then they become the star gurus. I'm just going to look at some of these gurus and mention some of their disciples. If I mention every disciple in this page, it covers the whole spectrum of Bharatanatyam as we know it. Every name, every superstar is on this page. And every superstar has learnt from one Nattuvanar or the other. There's no one to go to. Kalakshetra, in Kalakshetra itself, she had Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai teaching, she had Mailapur Gauriamma, a Devadasi teaching. So the source was still the same, but none of the source remain as participants in the new formed Bharatanatyam. All the practitioners are people like Rukmini Devi Arundel. So Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, Muthukumaran Pillai, Kittappa Pillai, Kandappa Pillai. Kandappa Pillai is very important. He was Bala Saraswati's guru and Nattuvanar. Ramaya Pillai, I'll come back to him, another very interesting character. Yellappa Pillai, Dandayuthapani Pillai. Little later, Swamivalaya Rajaratram. Then you have a whole wing that went to Bombay. Kalyana Sundaram Master, who is now there, his ancestors went there. Then there is this very interesting story. You know, there's a whole Bharatanatyam tradition, Sadir tradition, which is now Bharatanatyam tradition, in Baroda. And that is very interesting. So what happens is, I think it's in the late 19th century, the king of Baroda marries into the royal family of Tanjore. So along with the queen's entourage are sent Devadasis, Nattuvanars to Baroda. Yeah. There is, and there's a photograph. And they, in fact, the modern university department of Bharatanatyam, which is very flourishing in Baroda, is a result of this whole family moving to Baroda. So you have this whole list of great Nattuvanars who participate in this process. Now here there are two other elements which are important. One is cinema. When the Devadasis lost their footing in the social religious spectrum, there were 2-3 places where they found presence. One is many of them you see started releasing 78 RPMs records. Okay, so they were being recorded. That is after they stopped public performance of Devadasi. Some of them started doing like even concert performance for white, but that also died down. Through a period of time it died down. Some of them went into the world of cinema as actors because the Brahmin women cannot act in cinema. So you will find in a lot of early films, many of them are actually Devadasis. Then, when the Brahmin women became important also, they also went into cinema, right? Much later, but they also went in. But who were the people who were choreographing, whether it was a Devadasi or the Brahmin later, who was choreographing these dance sequences? The same Nattuvanars. So Bharatanatyam gets itself a fabulous new stage in the world of the celluloid. So some of the names, I mean some of the older people here would recognize these names. Younger people have to again do a YouTube search. I think Padmini, Lalita, Padmini, Ragini, they were 3 sisters. They all started, I think they're all Malayali, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they're from Kerala. They all started dancing, but they were all students of who? Ramaiah Pillai of the Vazhavur style, who was very involved in the cinema world also. So then they start dancing by Jayantimala Bali. Of course, a Brahmin woman dancing in cinema. So Bharatanatyam becomes almost, Kamala of course, Kamala, not to forget Kamala. So Bharatanatyam becomes very important in the cinema world. So the Nattuvanars are not only important in teaching Brahmin women to be stage performers, but they are also choreographing for dance. So to put it in a very economic sense, the market is seriously expanding for this community. But in all this, the Devadasi, the woman, the actual woman, is completely losing out to a period of time, is losing out. So there's of course this whole interesting, I think some scholars are working on it now, I'm looking forward to read it whenever it comes out, is the influence of South Indian cinema on the form that has later been called Bharatanatyam. This is an interesting thing to look at, is how much of the cinematic Bharatanatyam has been imbibed into the form itself as being the form that is performance on stage, in terms of movement, in terms that, because that also that kind of cross-pollination would have also happened. So that's also something people are working at. Now, at the same time, another thing is happening. From the late 19th century, maybe the last decade, interest in Orientalism is very high around the world. Whether it is Europe or whether it is America. The whole idea of the Indian woman, the idea of the Indian dance, the spiritualism attached to it, the dances attached to it, all this becomes very, very intriguing. And I'm just going to bring that in also because that also plays a part in how Bharatanatyam or dance from here is viewed across the world. And I'll read one section and then tell you about one interesting character in this too. One more. Oh, I'll come back to that. This is from the biography of Bala Saraswati, written by her son-in-law, Douglas Knight. Just reading one little section. Subhead is Modern Dance in the West. Among those who influenced the reconstruction of classical dance in India were dancers from North America and Europe, who were ironically renegades from their own cultures. Dancers who set out to redefine the form and social place of dancing in their countries of origin. They shared a fascination with exotica and invented expressions of Oriental dance that had become popular with Western audiences by the late 1800s. Interest in the Orient, at both the serious intellectual and popular levels, peaked at the end of the 19th century. It was part of an anti-modern sentiment, a rejection of the industrialized world in favor of the perceived transcendence of the ancient teachings of Asian traditions. To try on the trappings of different non-European cultures was itself seen as a way of breaking with European art and forging a new distinctively American culture. The Chicago Columbian Exposition in 1890 was organized on the occasion of the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. The exposition's primary purpose, unsettling in retrospect, was to bring together the fruits of man's material progress. Everything imaginable was on the exhibit, not only achievements of Western civilization, but the better to show these off, life-size models of the more backward cultures of the world. I've also seen images of little during this exposition. I think there were little tribal sets taken all the way from Asian places, put on shows. There's some kind of an exotic thing, which is actually reflective of see how progressive we are, but look at how regressive these kind of societies are. It's mentioned here too. The exposition's midway was described as a hurly-burly of exotic attractions, mosques and pagodas, Turkish bazaars, South Sea Island huts, Irish and German castles, and Indian teepees. A performer called Little Egypt, the prime attraction at the Persian palace, danced the hoochie coochie, a suggestively lascivious contorting of the abdominal muscles. And that was almost shockingly disgusting and hugely popular. Some of them are in quotes, I'm not mentioning that, okay? I'm just giving you this whole picture, it's very interesting. By the beginning of the 20th century, several artists were performing impressionistic dance distinct from ballet that became the precursor of modern dance. This is important. Performing both in garden parties of the well-to-do and in art theaters in the United States and Europe, the pioneers included Louis Fuller, Maud Allen, Isadora Duncan, and Ruth St. Denis. This Ruth St. Denis is a very important, she's one of the prime people to have created the idea of modern dance in America. Now, it is said that she was inspired by some, I think it is a cigarette case of an Egyptian dancer. But the thing was, you later read that many Nautch dancers had gone to America in the last decade of the 19th century. And they were functioning in circus kind of context, in some exotic dance context. But there was some immigration law that was changed in the early 20th century, after which they could not get their citizenship there. So it kind of died off. So all these people were being influenced by these kind of not. Ruth Dennis never learned any Indian dance. She never came to India and learned Indian dance. This lady called Ruth St. Denis. But she was a super hit. One of her ballets is called Radha. Okay? And she adopted a lot from what she saw maybe from Nautch dancers, from maybe certain pictures, and created this whole exotica of a dance, which is representative in some fashion of what could be called old Indian dance. These are all interesting. Here it talks about that also. St. Denis developed an impression of the dance of India, which she presented in 1906 in a solo dance named Radha. It was St. Denis's belief that each gesture and pose should objectify an inner emotional state. And she conceived Radha as an elaborate network of spatial and gestural symbols signifying emotional states such as rapture, despair, or inspiration. So obviously this is some hodgepodge of reading a bit of theory, watching some things, but creating something. So there is also their own social context, a certain kind of a revolt happening to the politics and society of their own times, and they reach out to certain unknown mystical elements to kind of counter their own cultural movements. The connection between specific emotional states and the gestures, okay, this is not important. As the 20th century progressed, several Indians also contributed to the rise of new dance in the West. Now here there is another important figure who comes in. His name is Uday Shankar. I don't know how many here have heard this name. How many here know Ravi Shankar? Okay. Ravi Shankar's brother is Uday Shankar. And if I may tell you, Ravi Shankar used to dance before he properly learned to play the sitar. You know that? Okay. He was in Europe with his brother's troupe for a whole tour before then he came here and he learned from Alauddin Sahib. But before that he was also a dancer. Uday Shankar is a very, very interesting man. Now he was never properly trained in any dance form. He was a self-taught dancer. He created this whole idea of nouveau modern Indian dance interpretation. Now, which was a fusion of, what could be called classical dance, Bharatanatyam being revitalized at that time. So we know he saw Balasubramanian dance and he was completely bowled over by her dance. I think it is in the 30s. He, I think, was instrumental in getting her invited, in fact, to Kolkata to dance. So Uday Shankar, greatly influenced by Indian traditions, could be folk traditions, tribal traditions, what you call classical traditions, all these are tags, but being influenced, creates this new modern idea of dance, goes on tour of Europe with this. And he is also, during the 30s for a period of time, I mean during the 20s, not even the 30s, sorry, for a period of time he also was working with this very famous ballet dancer called Anna Pavlova. Anna Pavlova was a very important figure in the world of ballet in Europe. Again, a person who reached out to other cultures and other traditions to recreate the idea of ballet. Anna Pavlova, by the way, also toured India. I'll come to that. He worked with her, but then he made his own company. Imagine in those days going to Paris and creating your own dance company. I mean, this is beyond all our criticism of what could be exotica. Just in terms of human endeavor, it's quite phenomenal that this man goes, sits in Paris, creates his own dance company and flourishes. And his brother is part of the company, comes back to India, leaves everything, goes to a little village and spends the next 10 years learning sitar from an old man. I mean, if you look at it very at that level, it's quite a fascinating life that these people have chosen for whatever reasons. So Uday Shankar again creates, like Ruth Dennis is creating an image of what it could be Indian dance in America, and other people, Uday Shankar, Anna Pavlova are all creating an imagery of Indian dance in Europe. All this is happening at the time. A lot of their inspiration are the Nautch dances, at least for, for Ruth. For Uday Shankar, maybe even the Brahmins who had slowly started coming in by the 30s. But in all this is, parallelly what is happening here, the actual dance practitioner is slowly but steadily disappearing and being I was going to come to Ram Gopal. So Ram Gopal is also, I was going to come to him as one of the disciples. So there is this man called Ram Gopal. He again is part of this. He was in fact one of the early dancers to dance in America. I think in fact there was a quote here which is also important.
Whatever dance he invented, that dance form, that never took the form of the classical.
No. See, that's the primary problem of the classical. No, nothing modern can in the history of Indian in world culture.
Bharatanatyam and is more or less contemporary, right?
It is, but the point is that the sanctions that Bharatanatyam gives itself is itself ancient.
That didn't happen with Uday Shankar.
Yeah, Uday Shankar. See, this is a lot of this.
You see that kind of dance now. It does look, it looks something what we would easily call a troupe, right? I mean, it's certainly not a form that looks
As what? I'm curious. You see the problem? No, but you see the problem. But exactly what you tried to frame is the problem. That as that unquantifiable that is ingrained in your cultural being is what you will never give Uday Shankar's form. So which is why I've been saying even for music and dance the word classical.
Is it because it is not more widely adopted?
Classical is not widely adopted. Classical is adopted by the core community. See, no, there is a tradition, I mean there's a teaching school, he created a school in Almora by the way. And in fact, Kandappa Pillai, who was Bala Saraswati guru, was taken to Almora by him as a dance guru, much to the chagrin of Bala. She didn't like it at all, but so he taught Bharatanatyam there through Kandappa Pillai. But the point is, if a modern discourse proclaims itself to be modern, can that modern discourse ever be a classical discourse? Becomes culturally very problematic for acceptance. Because the idea of the classical is ingrained in certain aspects that are undebatable, fundamentally, that do carry, like I said, the idea of untouched, beyond, cleansed, pure. The idea of modern in its construction is to destroy that idea. The idea of the modern in our psychological construction questions this idea fundamentally. Right? When you say something is modern, it questions the idea of traditional, because we see it as a dichotomous. Though we may all rattle off this whole idea of that change is the only constant continuum and all this usual statements. The truth is we don't function that way. Simple, the shirts that we wear are also in a way straddled with the idea of the classical and the modern. The way you clothe is straddled with the way. I'll give you a very nice example of my daughters. My daughters, what they dress. How do I decide that what my daughter is dressing is modern and not classical? Because I'm judging sexuality. If I see it as being sexually overt, then I call it modern. If I see it as being sexually conservative, I call it traditional. That's the classical, which is constructionally completely wrong, right? So, but we do this with everything. It's not just this. Therefore, it is very difficult for Uday Shankar to get a classical acceptability, because he's seen as being an interventionist movement. He's intervening in the idea of the classical, which is why what is brilliant at one level of Bharatanatyam is the fact that exactly, so it creates a form that can be called classical and actually say Sadr is a corrupted idea at some level. You flip that whole discourse on its head, and for that the Sadr practitioner cannot be present. You need new practitioners. And which community can give you a sanctity? A community that believes in the idea of sanctity, which is upper caste and upper class communities. Now, I'm not debating right and wrong here. Okay? I'm not taking sides over here. We are just trying to observe these movements, because the thing is, these movements happen across cultures, across the world. So, we're going to come to Ram Gopal here, since he mentioned it. Uday Shankar began performing in Europe with Anna Pavlova in 1923. Ram Gopal was first performed in the United States in 1938. Mrilanili Sarabhai, people who heard of Vikram's wife, rather Mrilanili's husband, correction. First dance in the United States and Europe in the late 1940s. Indrani Rahman, first dance in North America in 1950s. So there was this whole movement of these dancers also dancing. And Bala Saraswati herself, became a phenomena in North America. Bala Saraswati connection, in fact, her great revitalization happened with the American connection, with the whole Mr. Brown and the whole creation of the family called the Scripps. I mean, it's a different story by itself. But her own revitalization happened through, I think, from the 50s and 40s, when she started traveling a lot to America. So there are multiple things in operation over here happening at the same time. Search for national identity is happening, independence is happening. These forms, this idea of